Episode 2 of the Book of Boba Fett has dropped on Disney+, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on the second episode of the Book of Boba Fett, as well as how the show is doing thus far. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comment section. No need for a spoiler warning down below. And let's just dive into my review, and I felt the second episode was an improvement over the first. There's a few reasons for that. First off, I think episode 1, it just kind of set my expectations for the show, so I was just better acclimated going into episode 2, knowing the sort of experience that I was going to get. Second piece to it, this episode was 10-15 minutes longer, and with the first episode kind of laying the foundation, episode 2 having more runtime, it just felt like it moved things along a lot further. We actually had a lot more development here than we had in the first episode. And then the other reason for that is just more stuff happened, in particular in the flashback sequences that kind of got me invested in the story a little bit more. All that said, though, kind of my praises and my criticisms of the show all feel like they still kind of stand. The thing I like about the show is it's just nice to be in Star Wars world with these characters, these creatures. Familiar faces, even if they're not familiar, like a Wookiee shows up, Hutt shows up, and they're not the Wookiee that we really know. That's not the Hutt that we spent a bunch of time with in the original trilogy, but just seeing the familiar creatures feels nice. It's comforting in a certain sense, as Star Wars is one of my comfort movies and TV shows as they are now. But at the same time, the show's taking a long time to really kick into high gear and have the story get going. In particular, in the present timeline. I think the flashbacks, there's a lot more happening there. There's more development, relationships being formed, and you feel the needle moving. You see where that's headed, and there's emotional payoff to it. Whereas in the present timeline, we're 2 episodes in, and it just feels like we're still hitting the same note of Boba Fett has taken up for Bib Fortuna, but there's people there that think that they have claim to the area. And in episode 1, we thought it was going to be the mayor, and that's where we kind of started off in this one, still the mayor. Then we realized, no, it's this twin pair of Hutts. But as for like really progressing things and feeling like the dynamic has changed, he's going into action, we're trying to sort this out. It's really taking its time in that present storyline to have much happening. It still feels like we're just setting things up. We're just kind of establishing characters, having conversation, maybe a little quick action beat, but there's just not a lot there. And I think that's one of the fundamental problems with having a TV show where you're splitting your runtime with 2 stories. In which case we're 2 episodes in and we only have about 30 minutes of time in the present timeline. That's not a lot if you're trying to do this Godfather-esque world of this guy trying to run Tatooine and take over for Jabba the Hutt and Bib Fortuna. And you're 2 episodes in and it's only like 30 minutes of screen time to make stuff happen, and you want to throw action into the mix. And you only have 7 episodes. And so it feels like we're about over a third of the way through the season, and we're still just putting the pieces in place. It's just very slow. There's nothing really hooking me. There's nothing specifically interesting about the present timeline stuff. It's just Star Wars is a world I like to spend time in. Boba Fett is an interesting character, especially with the developments that they're giving him and how getting eaten by a Sarlacc and being taken captive kind of humbled him a little bit and had this change of heart in certain ways. There's interesting stuff in that regard. But the plot itself, it's the same note that was in the trailer. He's taken over, but people don't respect him yet. We're still on that exact same note 2 episodes in, and it hasn't teased anything beyond that. It hasn't implied where this is really going. It's just that same exact struggle that we learned about in the trailer. But then we have the flashbacks, and I think that's where the show has a lot more meat and substance to it, where you see Boba Fett becoming the person that he was when he showed up in The Mandalorian, who went through this ordeal that I think changed him a little bit from the ruthless bounty hunter to having a very different kind of perspective on the world. And it's using the tried and true fallen warrior, humbled warrior goes primitive. Man Called Horse, Dances with Wolves, Ferngully, Pocahontas, Last Samurai, Avatar. Tried and true formula that feels like actually a pretty logical extension of what they've been setting up with these Mandalorian stories. Whereas it was obviously the Mandalorian was borrowing heavily from Westerns and took the story templates of Westerns and samurai stories. And this story arc very much seems like a logical kind of continuation of that to do something different that complements what the Mandalorian was doing in another sense. And what I mean by that is that, like in Dances with Wolves, the idea was of this Civil War soldier goes primitive. He goes and starts living with the Native Americans. Or in The Last Samurai, once again, Civil War soldier goes and gets stuck with these, the last of the samurai, and falls in love with their culture. So then in this show, the Sand People are the stand-in for the Native Americans. They've been portrayed up to this point in time as just these savages. They are native to this planet. They are less technologically advanced. And here you have someone joining them in finding the beauty of their ways. And that's what happened in Dance with Wolves, Pocahontas, Last Samurai, Avatar. And then kind of even beyond that, what was the original trilogy? It was a civil war. And Boba Fett was of sorts someone that took part in that war that was going on. And these flashbacks are taking place right as that war ended, because it picks up right after Return of the Jedi, or right in Return of the Jedi. So the exact timeline isn't exactly clear as to when exact things happened, but when the rebels defeated the Empires, parallel to this in a certain sense. And so you have this soldier from a civil war joining the native people and helping them kind of move into the modern era while discovering the beauty of their tribe. And that's up to this point in time, that's much more satisfying and interesting than Boba Fett being like, I'm in charge. And then someone else goes, no, I'm in charge. We're going to hunt you. There's just nothing to the stuff in the present timeline. Whereas there is some meat and depth to what's taking place in the flashbacks. And so you have him growing, changing, earning respect. And that's what compelling storytelling involves. And once again, in the present timeline, there's not really growth, development, change. That's what you're having in the flashbacks. And add to that, you get like a train heist in the mix where he's teaching them to use technology and they battle a train. So fun, exciting, Western-esque action sequence taking place there. And once again, he earns more respect and teaches them a little bit how to negotiate with other people and how modern societies work, not just their tribal customs. So there's just interesting stuff actually taking place in that era. At the same time, one of the setbacks, one of the things that holds back the Sand People plotline is that the Sand People are Sand People. They do not speak English. They don't even speak in like a different language. They speak in like they make noises like that. And they don't have faces that articulate things. So you don't have their words that you can really understand in a normal sense that you track along with language. You don't have facial expressions to track with their emotions. And that makes it very difficult for them to have discernible personalities. There's little things that they can do to make it clear who the leader is and his gestures and accepting Boba Fett into their tribe and giving him his staff and kind of the journey that happens with all of that. But as for personalities, distinctive characters, character arcs for them, really tough to do that when you're limited to the tones of their yells and their hand gestures. Likewise, Tatooine is just a very drab environment. It always has been. It always will be. It's a sand planet. And there's a reason that Star Wars tends to globe hop. Like George Lucas talked about how in his movies, he always wanted to have at least 3 different, very distinct environments that he could go to. So then Empire Strikes Back, Hoth is snow white. And then you go to Dagobah, it's brown and green swamp, and then Cloud City is orange clouds and futuristic, like very distinct environments. And then even on the Mandalorian, they're planet hopping, and the different adventures are on different planets. And there was a lot of sand. There was a lot of these types of westerny environments. That's true. But here we're only in this one environment. And in particular with the sand people, we're just sitting on sand dunes. And so it's just, it lacks a little bit of a flair to the environments, that it's just monotonous. So where do I kind of land on the show? I'm enjoying it enough. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, I'm just going to throw in the towel and stop watching. I'm not. Of course, I'm going to keep watching, and I'm interested, and I want to know where it's going. But it feels like if I was ranking these episodes with the Mandalorian episodes, both of these ones would be pretty low in there, like bottom tier. Maybe top of the bottom tier, but bottom tier. That's kind of where they feel for me, because it's just, there hasn't been that super interesting thing. There's that slow burn intrigue in our going primitive story with the Sand People. The present timeline stuff, I think, really needs to do something different. It needs to kick into high gear, because it's a bad sign when the most interesting thing that you've done up to this point in time is have a Wookiee show up in a pair of Hutts. That, like, without nothing, that's just it. It's like, oh, I recognize them. That's it. That's as interesting as it gets. And even though you have Ming-Na Wen and Fennec, and it's just nothing interesting happening. They really need to kick it into high gear there to balance the show out and have something that's like, and I think that's kind of one of the things people, after the first week or some of us, like, there hasn't been a big hook. There wasn't like that wow moment. There's some people pushing back like, well, not every show needs to have a classic character returning. Not every show needs to have a big, gigantic twist reveal. I'm like, that's fair enough. But you have to have something that makes your show stand out, that makes it interesting, that is memorable, that's iconic, that's something that's not just, we're in Star Wars world. And that's what this feels like right now. We're in Star Wars world, and our flashback plotline has some meat to it. Could be interesting. I'm enjoying it. That's where the substance is. And then the present day, there's nothing about it that is unique, that's interesting, that stands out. It's just, we're watching Boba Fett on Tatooine in Star Wars world. That's it. There's nothing, there's no layers to it. There's no arcs, development. There's not much mystery, intrigue. Any of the things that make for a compelling story is just not there yet. And we are in the first 2 episodes, so it's, you do have to set things up. But when you're a third of the way through and it just feels like, where are we going with this? Like, what are we doing? That's a problem. I know where we're going in the flashbacks. I know how this can be interesting. The stuff in the present, it needs something, and it needs it quick. Like next week, you gotta add something in there that's flashy, that's interesting. Otherwise, we have a big problem with this show and your actual plotline to it. Let me know what you thought down below. It seems like the internet's pretty divided on it. There's a lot of people that are really digging it and just enjoying spending time in this world. And then there's a lot of us that are kind of right there in the middle of like, I want to dig it, but pick it up. Get moving here. Add something that has some spice, flair, kick to it. Something worth talking about, because it doesn't feel like there's much worth talking about up to this point in time. And then a few people are calling it awful. So all opinions are all over the place on this show. Let me know what you thought down below, and keep talking movies and TV too much.